Hi artists, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the part 2 of the Basic Watercolor Series in my YouTube channel. And if you haven't watched the part 1 titled 6 Basic Watercolor Techniques yet, I encourage you to watch it first. But if you are a beginner that already has an idea about the techniques, you are free to proceed in this video. So, I have already prepared the shapes that we are going to fill in this tutorial. We will be performing the wet on dry technique on top portion of this figure, and on the lower portion of the figure we're going to do the wet on wet technique. Then lastly, on the lower part of this watercolor paper, I've already made square shapes, and I'll be teaching you on how to mix complementary colors to produce your own shades of gray. The first thing that you have to do is to prepare your paints already. Red, blue, and yellow. Since we're going to do the wet on dry technique, first it is important to remember that your paper is supposed to be the dry material. You also have to make sure that your paint you have prepared is of the saturation that you like, as the watercolor paints usually get lighter in color as it dries up. So we are going to use the provided paintbrush of the Prang watercolor palette. First, take an enough amount of yellow and fill in the corner of the shapes provided. So you might be wondering why I'm tilting the paper in this manner. It is simply because I wanted the paint to flow freely, and we are taking advantage of the gravity to pull the paint downwards. And so what we do is to make sure that the paper is filled in properly, and our paintbrush holding through the paint. Now, if you are halfway to the other end of the figure, take a bit of red and mix it with your yellow paint. In this way, you will be making your own gradient of color till you reach the sole color, which is red. The continuation of the wet to dry method will be fast forwarded since I'll assume you get the gist. Okay, now we'll do the wet to wet application of the primary colors so we can produce the secondaries. The first step in using the wet on wet technique is to wet your paper first with a decent amount of water, then the next thing is to apply the wet paint to the wet paper. It is just like the previous wet on dry technique, but this time the water itself is doing most of the job in mixing for you. We'll do the same thing to the other shapes, and the video from this point will be fast forwarded. Now we are in our last part of the tutorial, making grays. So we first have to remember that gray color isn't just a light saturation of a black pigment. You can also make a gray hue using the complementary colors as basing to this color wheel. Now we are on our last part of the tutorial, making grays. So we first have to remember that gray color isn't just a light saturation of a black pigment. You can also make a gray using the complementary colors. Whereas red complementary is green, yellow's complementary is purple or violet, and a blue is complementary with orange. Complements are good combination as well if we are trying out sets of clothing or you wanted to be more experimental with your paintings. Just remember that the darkest color isn't always black, and you can make a gray from the shadows of the bright colors. Okay, so the first color that we will be mixing is the red-green complementary colors. As you can see, the topmost part of this box is, you can say, much warmer because we are leaning more to the warmest pigment, which is our red. Then on the lower part of the box, we have the coolest gray. We are leaning more to the cooler side of the color, which is our green pigment. Then we proceed with the orange and blue complementary colors. It's still the same principle as of the previous gray, but this time you may be able to see a slightly greenish hue of grays. Then lastly, mixture will be of the complementary yellow and violet. It is still the same principle as of the other two grays, and the good thing with this is if you use this type of gray, perhaps if you're making bananas, it is effective in making your shadows more realistic. Last part is where I'll show you that it is also possible to make your own darker gray using blue and black. Then last but not the least, we are going to make our warm gray. But it's just how I call it. It's basically the brown color. Okay, that's it for the tutorial today. I hope you learned something. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and turn the notification button by clicking the bell. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.